My mother-in-law hit my daughter at dinner, but she didn't expect what I did next. The sound came before I could process what my eyes were seeing. That sharp crack of skin against skin echoed through the dining room, bouncing off the walls like an accusation. My daughter Lily froze mid-reach, her small hand still hovering over the last piece of fried chicken on the platter. Her other hand flew to her cheek, already turning pink beneath her fingers. She was only 6 years old. The room went silent. You know that kind of silence where even the air seems to hold its breath? That's what it felt like. Then I heard it. Laughter. Soft at first, like someone testing the waters, then growing bolder, meaner. My mother-in-law, Patricia, stood there with the serving platter still clutched in her bony fingers, her face twisted into something ugly and satisfied. "You greedy little brat," Patricia hissed, leaning down toward Lily's trembling face. "You're just as selfish as your father." The laughter around the table grew louder. My husband's aunt chuckled into her wine glass. His cousins smirked from across the room. And my husband, David, he just sat there looking at his plate like the pattern on the china was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word in Lily's defense. Something inside me cracked. You know how they say you can hear glass breaking in slow motion in your head? That's what it felt like. All the years of biting my tongue, of smiling through Patricia's cruel little comments, of pretending her contempt didn't cut me to the bone, it all shattered in that one moment. I stood up slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Every eye in that room turned to me, but I only had eyes for Patricia. I walked around the table, my footsteps deliberate, measured. When I reached her, I grabbed a fistful of her perfectly styled silver hair and pulled her down to my level. "You should never have touched my daughter," I whispered, my voice so calm it scared even me. Her eyes went wide with shock. She tried to jerk away, but my grip held firm. The room erupted in gasps and shouts, but I didn't care. For the first time in 5 years of marriage, I'd stopped caring what the Hendersons thought of me. They called it a misunderstanding, of course. An overreaction on both sides. Patricia sat on the couch dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, playing the victim while David's family clustered around her like she was the one who'd been wronged. My husband stood in the corner, his jaw tight, looking everywhere but at me. "Morgan, you need to apologize," he said finally, his voice low and strained. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but a coward. But I also saw the way Lily was watching me from the doorway, her little face pale and confused. So I did what I had to do. I apologized. Publicly, calmly, respectfully. I said all the right words in all the right tones, because I'd learned long ago that rage is best served with restraint. Patricia accepted with a sniff and a martyred expression. "I suppose we all got a bit heated," she said, patting my hand like I was a misbehaving child she decided to forgive. "But Morgan, dear, you really must teach Lily better manners. Taking the last piece when there are still guests at the table." I smiled and nodded and said nothing. But inside, something cold and calculating was taking root. We drove home in silence. David kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel of his BMW. Lily fell asleep in her booster seat, her cheek still faintly red where Patricia had struck her. I sat in the passenger seat and stared out at the darkness rushing past, my mind working through everything that had happened. That night, after I'd tucked Lily into bed and kissed her swollen cheek, I sat alone on our back porch. From where I sat, I could see the lights of Patricia's house across the wooded lot that separated our properties. David had insisted we buy this property in Riverside Estates specifically because it was close to his mother. Now those lights felt like searchlights, watching, judging, controlling. Patricia had always hated me. From the moment David brought me home, she'd made it clear I wasn't good enough for her son. I was from the wrong part of town, went to state school instead of an Ivy League, worked as a veterinary technician instead of something more prestigious. She's lucky David took pity on her, I'd once overheard her telling his aunt. But tonight's insult was different. It wasn't just cruelty. It was specific. Personal. "You're just as selfish as your father." I couldn't sleep. The phrase kept playing in my mind like a song stuck on repeat. Just as selfish as your father. How would Patricia know anything about Lily's father's character? She'd only known me for 6 months before David and I got married. She'd only known Lily since birth. Unless... No. I pushed the thought away. It was crazy. Paranoid. The kind of thing you think at 2 a.m. when everything seems sinister and wrong. But it wouldn't leave me alone. I got up and went to Lily's room, standing in the doorway watching her sleep. She had David's dark hair and his straight nose. But her eyes, when they were open, they were hazel like mine. Her smile was mine too, crooked on one side. Wasn't it? I went back to bed, but David was awake now, staring at the ceiling. "You embarrassed me tonight," he said quietly. "She hit our daughter." She tapped her hand. "You grabbed my mother by the hair like some kind of psycho." I turned to look at him in the darkness. She slapped her face. "David. And you just sat there." He was quiet for a long moment. "My mother has strong opinions about discipline. We were raised to respect our elders. And I was raised to protect my child." He turned away from me then, his back a wall between us. I stared at the ceiling until morning came, that phrase still echoing in my head. Over the next few days, I started to notice things I'd never paid attention to before. The way David's phone would buzz with texts from his mother at odd hours. The way he'd take the calls in another room, his voice low and tense. The way he'd come home from her house with that guilty expression he usually reserved for when he'd forgotten an anniversary. On Thursday, Patricia called during dinner. David answered immediately, stepping into the hallway. I could hear the murmur of their voices but not the words. When he came back, Lily looked up at him with those big hazel eyes. "Was that Grandma Patricia?" she asked, pushing her mac and cheese around her plate. "Yes, sweetheart." "Is she still mad at Mommy?" David's jaw tightened. "No one's mad at anyone. Eat your dinner." "Daddy," Lily said softly, "why doesn't Grandma Patricia like Mommy?" The question hung in the air. David looked at me, then back at Lily. "Your grandmother likes everyone, honey. She's just old-fashioned sometimes." Old-fashioned. That was one way to put it. On Saturday, David took Lily to his mother's house for lunch. He asked if I wanted to come. I said I had errands to run. The moment their car pulled out of the driveway, I went upstairs to our bedroom. I'd never been the snooping type. In 5 years of marriage, I'd never once gone through David's phone or his belongings. But that phrase wouldn't let me go, and I needed answers. I started with his nightstand. Nothing but receipts and old golf scorecards. His closet was just clothes and shoes. I was about to give up when I noticed the antique dresser in the corner, the one that had belonged to his grandmother. David never used it, said it was just for show, but there was a small drawer at the bottom that stuck a little when I pulled it. Inside were photos. Old ones, mostly from before we met. David as a kid, Patricia looking younger and happier. Some wedding photos of his parents. I was about to close it when I saw the edge of a newer photo sticking out from beneath the others. I pulled it out carefully. It was Lily as a newborn, still in the hospital. But I wasn't in the photo. Just Patricia holding her, and David standing beside them both. Patricia was smiling, but not at the baby. She was looking at whoever was taking the picture, her expression triumphant, almost possessive. I flipped the photo over. There was writing on the back in Patricia's distinctive handwriting, "Finally, our girl. Everything worked out just as we planned. D." My hands started shaking. I read it again. "Our girl. Not your girl or the baby. Our girl." And what did "everything worked out just as we planned" mean? I put the photo back exactly where I'd found it and closed the drawer. My mind was racing, connecting dots I didn't want to connect. I went to the guest room where we kept old papers and started going through the boxes from when Lily was born. The birth certificate. The hospital bracelet. A card from Patricia that read, "Congratulations on your beautiful daughter." Nothing seemed off. But then I found a photo album I didn't remember seeing before. It was from the hospital, those first few days after Lily was born. I'd had a difficult delivery. Emergency C-section, lots of complications. I'd been on heavy painkillers for days. The memories from that time were fuzzy at best. But as I looked through the photos, I realized something strange. Patricia was in almost every single one. Standing beside David, holding Lily, even sitting in my hospital room while I slept. In one photo, she and David were standing outside my room, their heads close together, deep in conversation. I was visible through the window behind them, unconscious in the bed. They both looked serious, tense. I closed the album and sat there on the floor of the guest room, my heart pounding. I was building a conspiracy in my head. I knew that. But the pieces kept fitting together in ways that made my stomach turn. That's when I made my decision. On Monday morning, after David left for work and Lily left for school, I went to the drugstore in the next town over. I bought a home DNA testing kit, the kind that's supposed to be just for curiosity, for learning about your ancestry. But they also show biological relationships. I felt like a criminal, like I was doing something unforgivable. What kind of mother suspects her own child might not be hers? Except that wasn't what I suspected. Not exactly. That night, after Lily fell asleep, I swabbed the inside of her cheek as gently as I could. She stirred but didn't wake. I swabbed my own cheek too, sealed everything in the provided envelopes, and hid them in my car. The next morning, I dropped the kit in the mail on my way to work. The website said results would take 2 to 3 weeks. I didn't know how I was going to make it that long. But I only had to wait 11 days. The email came on a Friday afternoon. I was at the clinic, helping Dr. Morrison with a golden retriever who'd eaten something he shouldn't have. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it until we were done, until the dog was stable and his worried owners were calming down. Then I went to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and opened the email. Your results are ready. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I clicked the link. Entered my password. Waited while the page loaded. Relationship analysis, mother-daughter probability, 99.9%. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Lily was mine. Of course she was mine. I'd been paranoid, crazy, letting Patricia's cruelty get into my head. But then I scrolled down. There was another section. Additional biological relationships detected. I clicked on it. Half-sibling relationship detected between submitted sample 2, Lily Henderson, and database sample DH, David Henderson. Probability, 99.7%. I read it 3 times before I understood. Half-siblings. Lily and David were half-siblings. Which meant David was not Lily's father. He was her half-brother. Which meant the father was. I ran out of the bathroom and barely made it to the trash can before I threw up. I called in sick for the rest of the day. Drove home in a daze. Sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes trying to make my mind work properly. David's father had died when David was 15. Heart attack. So the father couldn't be Patricia's brother. I'd only met him once, at our wedding. Theodore. He was wealthy, unmarried, lived in Boston. He'd given us a generous check and I'd never thought about him again. The timeline was clicking into place now. David and I had been dating for 8 months when I got pregnant. We'd been careful, or so I thought. But there'd been that weekend trip to Cape Cod, to meet Patricia's family. Theodore had been there. There'd been a beach party, lots of drinking. I'd woken up the next morning with the gaps in my memory and attributed it to too much wine. 2 weeks later, I'd found out I was pregnant. David had been surprised but happy. We'd gotten married quietly at the courthouse. Patricia had been thrilled, insisted we move into the house next door to hers. I'd thought she'd warmed up to me because of the baby. Now I realized she was just claiming what she thought was hers. Our girl. Everything worked out just as we planned. I sat at the kitchen table until David came home. Until Lily was picked up by my sister for a sleepover, something I'd arranged that morning in a moment of clarity. Until it was just the 2 of us in the house. We need to talk, I said. David loosened his tie, went to the fridge for a beer. About what? About Lily. He froze. Just for a second, but I saw it. What about her? I slid the envelope across the table. The DNA test results, printed out in black and white. He stared at it like it might bite him. Open it, I said quietly. His hand shook as he picked it up. I watched his face as he read, watched the color drain away, watched his expression shift from confusion to understanding to panic. Morgan, I can explain. You're her uncle, I said. My voice was steady, calm. Too calm. Which makes your uncle her father. Theodore. That weekend in Cape Cod. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. Which part? I stood up slowly. The part where your family drugged and raped me? Or the part where you all conspired to make me think the baby was yours? We didn't, it wasn't, he was stammering now, his beer forgotten on the counter. You and Theodore, you were both drunk, it just happened. Nothing just happens, David. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. You don't just let your uncle assault your girlfriend. You don't just trick her into thinking her daughter is yours. You don't just move her in next door to your mother so she can play happy family with her brother's child. My mother didn't know, he said desperately. Not at first. Liar. I pulled out the photo, the one with Patricia's handwriting. Our girl. Everything worked out just as we planned. Your mother knew from the beginning. She probably planned the whole thing. David sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Theodore wanted a child. He couldn't have one the normal way. There are issues. And Mom wanted a grandchild so badly. And you were perfect. Young, healthy, you were already in the family. So you used me as a broodmate. The words tasted like poison. You raped me and stole 6 years of my life and made me think I was crazy for feeling like something was wrong. We gave you a good life. His head snapped up. A nice house, financial security, a family. You gave me a lie. The doorbell rang. We both jumped. David looked at me, confused, but I just walked to the door and opened it. Patricia stood on the porch. She must have seen David's car and assumed he was alone. Her face went pale when she saw me. Come in, I said pleasantly. We were just talking about you. Patricia stepped inside slowly, her eyes darting between David and me. She saw the papers on the table and something in her expression shifted. Not surprise, exactly. More like resignation. How long have you known? She asked, directing the question at me. Does it matter? I walked to the table and gathered up all the papers I'd laid out. The DNA test. The photo. Bank statements I'd pulled that showed regular wire transfers from Theodore to David over the past 6 years. Emails I'd found on David's laptop after he'd left for work that morning, discussing the arrangement. I'd spent the day preparing for this moment. Moving money. Calling lawyers. Making copies of everything. I'd learned from watching David's family all these years, you don't show your cards until you hold all the chips. I want you both to understand something, I said, my voice quiet but clear. For the past 11 days, I've had time to think. To plan. And I've realized that the slap was almost a gift. Because it made me see clearly for the first time in 6 years. Patricia's face hardened. That girl needed discipline. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't call her that girl. Her name is Lily, and she's mine. Not yours, not Theodore's. Mine. Biologically. Biology doesn't make you a parent, I said. Being there does. Loving them does. And I'm the only one who's done that for her. David stood up. Morgan, please. We can work this out. I love Lily. I love you. You love the idea of a perfect family, I interrupted. But you built it on lies and assault. And now it's over. I pulled out another set of papers. These are divorce papers. Already filed. The house is in both our names, but I've documented everything. The fraud, the conspiracy, the assault. My lawyer says I have an excellent case for full custody and a substantial settlement. You can't prove anything, Patricia said, but her voice wavered. I can prove the DNA, I said. I can prove the money transfers. I can prove the emails. And I can prove that you all knew from the beginning. Which makes it conspiracy. We gave you everything. Patricia's voice rose. A home, a husband, a child. You gave me a child who was already mine, I said. And you took everything else. My dignity. My autonomy. My right to know the truth about my own life. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. I'm picking up Lily from my sister's house now. When I come back, I want you both gone. David, you can stay at your mother's house. Patricia, you can go back to whatever hole you crawled out of. My lawyer will be in touch about the custody arrangement. You can't take her away from me, David said desperately. I've raised her. I'm the only father she's known. I paused at the door and looked back at him. You're right. And that's the only reason I'm not pressing charges. Because Lily loves you, and I won't destroy that for her. But you'll see her on my terms now. Supervised visits. No more weekends at Grandma's house. No more secrets. Patricia took a step toward me. You ungrateful little. Careful, I said softly. I may have been a victim once, but I'm not anymore. And if you ever touch my daughter again, I won't just grab your hair. Do you understand me? She stopped. Something in my face must have convinced her I meant it. I walked out into the cool evening air, got in my car, and drove to my sister's house. Lily was waiting on the front steps, her backpack beside her. "Mommy." She ran to me, and I caught her up in my arms, holding her tight. "Hey, baby," I whispered into her hair. "Ready to go home?" "Is Daddy coming?" "Not tonight. It's just you and me for a while." She pulled back and looked at me seriously. "Did you and Daddy have a fight?" "Something like that," I said. "But it's going to be okay. I promise." She nodded, trusting me completely, and my heart broke a little. She didn't know yet. How could I ever tell her? How could I explain that the family she knew was built on lies? But I would figure it out. Eventually. For now, I just buckled her into her booster seat and drove us home. The house was empty when we got back. David and Patricia were gone. I made Lily her favorite dinner, grilled cheese and tomato soup, and we ate together at the kitchen table. She chatted about her day with her cousins, about the movie they'd watched, about the new game she'd learned. I watched her smile, genuine and unafraid, and something inside me settled. This was right. This was how it should be. After dinner, I tucked her into bed and sat with her until she fell asleep. Then I went downstairs and poured myself a glass of wine. I sat on the back porch, just like I had 11 days ago, but this time when I looked at Patricia's house across the lot, the lights were dark. Tomorrow, I'd call Theodore. We'd need to have a conversation about child support, about his role in Lily's life, if any. My lawyer said I could probably press charges for assault, but I wasn't sure I wanted to put Lily through that. I'd decide later. For tonight, I just sat in the quiet darkness and let myself feel everything. The rage, the grief, the betrayal, the relief. Betrayal doesn't destroy you, I realized. It refines you. It burns away everything false until all that's left is the truth. And the truth was simple. I was Lily's mother. I had always been her mother. And nothing, not Patricia's schemes or David's lies or Theodore's crime, could change that. The morning sun would come. And when it did, Lily and I would be here to meet it. Together. Finally free. And as for that last piece of fried chicken? It was never about the chicken. It was always about who believed they owned the plate. And I'd just taken mine back.